Welcome all you partisans, purveyors of the GCAM, who are probably there right now, or actually they're at Mountain Readiness. I'm going to do my damnedest to get a little more podcasts out, but I also wanted to get back to reading this because my good friend Teddy, who loves to blast me in a private chat about how this medical knowledge is just stomping my behind on podcasts. And it's not a race to success, but the reality is if this guy has the amount of time to do this, so do I. And I really, really appreciated him putting this stuff out. We don't talk a lot about certain things on here because of trying to keep the politics out of the situation of what you guys are actually here for. I think there's too many good podcasts with politics. Obviously, Scout, the conflict podcast that Dolio's on, with all those guys. Just too many people are in that space, and y'all know where I'm standing. You probably figured out everybody else here. And it's not that I wouldn't take a 20 years ago liberal and have him on here at all. I definitely would. I think a lot of them are going to be experiencing the same shit we are. That said, I want to get you guys as prepared as I can. I understand that Scout and I disagree. He likes the written word as I do, but I learn better when somebody speaks to me. That's part of the reason why I go to historians classes and talk to him on the phone. I'm going to put this out right now because historians class in November is coming up, but it's on the edge of maybe not having it because we don't have as many people coming to this one. Maybe it's just finances, everything else. If you're on the fence, come to the November one, because if not, it's going to get pushed to March or sometime like that. I think November's a better time to be out at the G Camp. It's cold, but that's fine. That's what we're there for. Food, camaraderie, and everything else. I unfortunately can't go to the scout courses and all the other stuff that I want to go to. I'm going to miss Dolio out there, which has been one of the core people in my life that has brought me closer to God and some other stuff. But in the meantime, I want to continue on, and I'm going to do kind of the equivalent of co-witnessing two optics. We're going to talk about the Guerrilla's Guide to Baofeng Radio, obviously, and I want to run this into another, probably it's going to be a mano-a-mano podcast where I'm talking about historians classes and why it's so important, because I am trying to write an article on that too. So obviously, this was recorded before I actually talked to a historian, and I didn't get it out because of editing purposes. I didn't take the time to do the editing on this one, and then we had the opportunity to have a historian on, and I wanted him on, so I wanted that out first because his course is so important, and I want more people to know that it's going on. That said, we got him on. I also did one with Rabbit right after this one, so you will hear Rabbit talking about 9 lines, which I think was highly appropriate. So a lot of the plans that were put into place in this actually got done, which I'm grateful for. So, without further ado, let's go back to page 44. Communications planning considerations. The method described here are robust in detail and assume a high threat environment. While not necessary in this detail for sustainment level communications, in a tactical or clandestine environment, this degree of planning will become absolutely necessary regardless of the level of sophistication capability of an enemy. It requires discipline. Failure to recognize this reality will result in compromise and eventual failure. This is a reminder also that the methods for planning an SOI ensure that a group does not fall into the trap of creating a pattern. Changing one's practices regularly stymies and frustrates the efforts of predictive analysis hunting you, and in doing so will keep you alive. I will kind of hash this out a little bit more. Historian threw me on a book that's extremely good. He's also a savant about this stuff, and I would put him leagues above me in knowledge, both historically and just realistically. I'll caveat this because I had a conversation with some of the preppers out in Arkansas, and they're like, you've forgotten more than I've ever known, which might be true, but in the process of stuff, I know people who've forgotten more in probably a week than I'll ever know, and historian's one of those guys. So there's a key reason why we need to address this. and why this is so important, but I'm going to leave that to the end because I think it'll be more interesting and I want to read a little bit more. Going to page 45 on the Spiral Notebook one. 4. Traffic handling and reports. There's a right way and a wrong way to communicate on the air. Despite anything else, the biggest rule of thumb is to keep it short and sweet. The shorter the amount of time on the air, the better. Further, the clearer and more precise the language and enunciation on the air, the easier it will be for the receiver on the other end to understand you. We do not know what we sound like on the other end. And in addition, we have to assume two distinct but competing concepts. 1, everything we are saying is being monitored, and 2, everything we are saying is being copied down. There must be some reason we're transmitting. There is no such thing as routine traffic. If you're breaking squelch in an unconventional warfare environment, you're running the risk of being intercepted and found. While this may not be important for sustainment level communications, it's absolutely vital at the tactical and clandestine operation level. The faster and clearer we can convey the information, the more effective we become. And this begins with understanding how to send traffic the correct way. This is me, over. At the beginning of each transmission, the radio operator is calling another station to make contact. The operator first says the call sign of the station he's calling, then his own. This is me, over. The responding station will come back with the calling station's call sign first, then there as an acknowledgement. Wolf, this is Hound, over. Hound, this is Wolf. Go ahead, over. I'm going to pause this. I think everybody should train like this. The Marine Corps has cut it down quite succinctly, and I have that information somewhere in a PDF file. During GWAT, they really condense stuff, and it doesn't take away from communication, but the abbreviation of all this also is something you have to listen to. It's like listening to people on the ham radio talking their lingo. The more practice you have, the better you are. And this Guerrilla's Guide was built specifically for line of sight for the most part. Now, most of this is transferable over to HF, and almost all of it is, realistically. But he's talking about the verbal communications in this section, and this is what he drives home, because line of sight is very easy to track down if you know what you're doing, you have a cracked in radio and stuff like that. So any abbreviation helps. Instead of Wolf, this is Hound, over, it'd be Wolf, Hound, over, Hound, go ahead, over. Now, I'll say this. That's how the Marines were taught to do that. That's with clear transmission and reception. I think Scout is right in this as saying the other person's name or saying your own name as well. So it'd be Hound, Wolf, go ahead, over. If you know the pattern where things are supposed to be, it won't be that hard. And we use a lot of pro words in this stuff, and that's what he's going to continue. Pro words are just to shorten your conversation. But I'll continue on page 46. Pro words. Pro words are a series of words used in a transmission with a specific meaning. They are meant to keep the conversation short with a few explanations or unnecessary chatter to a minimum. The most common pro words and their corresponding meanings are: over, I am done with a statement, over to you. Out, I am done transmitting. Roger, I understand. Copy or how copy. I copied this down. What did you copy? Break, I'm going to the next line. I am breaking in. Say again. Say what you said again. Wilco, I will comply. Authenticate, give me the corresponding SARNED combination. Repeat, send the same firing solution, field artillery. We're going to pause again. The reason why I put repeat and say again is because artillerymen will send more artillery, missiles, whatever, downrange if you use the word repeat. If you've been around anyone in construction, stuff like that, there's not very many thumbs up because that will orient certain vehicles to do things, and we give the okay, the quote-unquote white power okay hand signal a lot more so everybody knows, oh yeah, I'm okay, or that's good, instead of a thumbs up. It's nuanced, but it's extremely important when you're dealing with tactical stuff. Maybe you don't have artillery. Maybe you'll never have access to artillery. Maybe you'll just be a guerrilla in the woods. Maybe you're in Ukraine and are balls deep in artillery barrages. This stuff gets important. That's why communications are so important. And I would put it as probably the third thing in a prepper's guide of things to do is the food, the water kind of combined, your medical knowledge, and then probably communications, and then shooting. Shooting is easier, so a lot of people go to that first. But this is why this book's so important. And we are going to continue on page 46 of about 140 pages. The use of pro words keeps things short and precise. That said, they also indicate a level of training and organization. So while in a military sense, old habits die hard, and for a good reason, they can also tip off anyone tasked with interception and monitoring. The words themselves only have meaning because they are in common practice. For a potential guerrilla, understanding the need for them and if substitutes can be created, use them if needed, just a consideration. Pause again, because we're on page 47, top of it, and in the middle. He's absolutely right. Pro words are a great way to deal with stuff that you don't want out there. It's been used since the dawn of time, and that may be something that you have to mix up, kind of like the trigrams in later in this book, to keep semi-secure. And it depends on what you're doing, how rapid your communication is. Are you in a firefight and you're calling stuff out and you have a specific pro word, or do you just want to use plain text to local people around you? That said, it's something to think about, changing your vernacular. The Navajo code talkers, which I, on my trip, saw a lot of information about that when I was out in the West, and having that can make things very confusing for somebody who's intercepting you. So think about that. Same thing as, for instance, if I listen to somebody speaking Spanish, I'll probably catch a word here and there, but I might not understand the whole context of stuff. That can be very important, but if you know what they're saying, that's a lot easier. And as we go on page 47, as a historical example of the concept, Russian ground commanders had a difficult time collecting anything of value from their signals intelligence assets when targeting Chechen leadership during the First and Second Chechen War. Chechen leadership cadre in the First War were primarily made of veterans of the Soviet-Afghan War and had prior knowledge of not just the Russian capabilities, but their failures in Afghanistan. Primarily leaned on local dialect to relay their traffic and supplied a large number of commercial VHF radios to all the villagers in targeted areas, creating a large volume of false or useless traffic and thus concealing the important information. Recognizing their own training and organizational needs while also understanding its pitfalls allowed them a strong degree of initial success. In addition, local slang reinforced the morale of the people, reminding them that they were in a struggle for survival. Both factors are critical notes for successful guerrilla leadership. Phonetics. As with pro words, the use of phonetics becomes critical on the air. We do not know what we sound like on the other end. That said, D and E sounds the same when we say them over the air. D, E, etc. So, to avoid confusion, phonetics are used in place of letters and numbers. We're on page 48. He's got the NATO standards on here. He also has the numbers. I'm not going to go through the phonetic alphabet. Go look it up. And he's got it broken down as the word and how to say it, which is very important. Let me see here. Let's go with Romeo. When you say it spoken, it'd be Ro-me-o. You pronounce it out so people can hear it very well. That said, I'm going to do the number one because a lot of people don't know this one. And they speak the numbers. And as somebody who's listened to a lot of numbers on radios in very bad static conditions, this becomes very important. 0, Z-ro. 1 is 1, W-U-N. 2, very easy, 2. 3 is tree, like a tree. 4 is fo-er. Fo-wer. When you say it with a F-O-H sound, it really helps catching it on the radio. 5 is fife. F-I-F-E. 6 is 6. 7 is sev-in. So you're really pronouncing that front part of the 7. 8 is 8, like I ate a bagel. 9 is niner. Trust me, it sounds weird, but it really does help the receiving end when you have bad audio. Continuing on, page 48. The military world uses the NATO standard, and commonly in law enforcement, other words, usually names, are used in place of their letters themselves. Using a standard set of phonetics keeps the transmission time short by cutting down any potential confusion on the air. While using the NATO standards can give away a certain degree of training and organization to a signals intelligence collection and analyst team, this potential risk does not outweigh the benefits. Since the potential guerrilla's best asset is unpredictability, create your own set of standard phonetics inside a group may be ideal. Just keep in mind, this can create problems with coordinating with other guerrilla bands across a region. As long as there is one standard everyone adheres to, a group will be good to go. This is page 49. We're going to take a break. This is extremely important when you get into HF. I know you guys probably all have, if you're listening to this podcast, have a Baofeng or something relatively similar to that. I don't care if it's an Anytone, a Wuxen, an Icom. A lot of the VHF, UHF comes in very clear because you squelch a lot of that out. When you get into the HF region, you're transmitting over static. And this becomes important. So let's go to back to page 49, reports. Reports, going back to our first concept above, that we are transmitting is being written down, owes to the necessity of transmitting mission critical information. The primary purpose of this is to transmit intelligence in the form of the location and capabilities of an enemy force. We do this through a simple report format known as salute, and it is supplement, report, salt. So you have salute and you have salt. So when you see something, you give a full salute report, and then if you need to adjust something or fix something, it's the salt, which is the addition to it. S, size in number of people, packs, and vehicles, fix. So the military uses packs as passengers, people, etc. PAX. It's a word used predominantly in almost every military that I've come across. That said, it's also easier to hear on the radio as packs and VIX instead of vehicles. Also kind of shortens it down a little bit for a little bit. A is for activity. What are they doing? L, location of activity. I may be in a certain location. I may be able to see 10, 12 miles or further, depending on mountain ranges and stuff like that. And I may have to give a specific location of that instead of just my position. And you always want to drop that location. Maybe they're 200 feet away from you. Maybe they're 30 miles away from you. That's important to give that information to whoever's higher up. U is for uniform. How can we positively identify them? So if you see somebody out there, a uniform might be the clothes, maybe it's civilian clothes, maybe there's a specific uniform, maybe they're wearing multicam, maybe it's God's pattern M81, whatever you want to let people know, hey, this is the group I'm seeing. Maybe they're all wearing black boots. Maybe they're just wearing a bandana. Maybe they're wearing red handkerchief or a blue handkerchief. This is stuff that kind of falls into, it may not be a full uniform like a military uniform. Maybe it's something identifying them. T is time of observation. So I may write this down, but it may not be mission critical. It may not be, I can easily transmit it safely. So I need to tell them the time that I saw this. E is for equipment. This is details on weapons, equipment, and capabilities. So capabilities might be, hey, they've got man pads out there, and they're like man pads, vehicles, what kind of small arms they may have. Do you see sniper rifles? Are they hunting rifles? Are they machine guns? Are they bazookas? That kind of thing. Salt. Salt is size, packs and Vic. A is activity. L is location. And T is time. You don't really have to do the uniform again, and you probably don't have to do the equipment. But say the guys are standing around doing nothing, and they change and they start moving to another location, setting up an ambush. You might be like, hey, that group of 10 dudes from my salute report is setting up an L-shaped ambush at this new location, time observed maybe now, maybe 10 minutes ago. Everyone with a radio, regardless of purpose, should be at least familiar with the format of these reports and the method to send them. The more eyes, the better. Salute reports are a simple way to relay the information in a clear, digestible format that allows an analyst to paint a more accurate picture in terms of an enemy capability. At first glance, salute and salt seem the same. There is much overlap between the two. Salute reports are the first and most detailed report to be sent and create the baseline. Salt report supports the salute report for any changes that may have occurred while observing the target. Sample salute report. Wolf, this is Hound, over. Hound, this is Wolf. Authenticate Kilo 1, over. Wolf, this is Hound. 0 India. Salute report, over. Roger, standing by. Line Sierra, 7 Pax, 1 Vic, break. Line Alpha, conducting pre-movement checks, break. Line Lima, Mike Delta, India, Alpha, November, Echo, Hotel, India, Romeo, break. Line Uniform, brown hats, black hoodies, red armband, break. Line Tango, 1, 2, 5, 7, local, break. Line Echo, plate carriers, AR-15s with IR laser, helmets with nod mounts. How copy, over. As the example, as you go through this stuff, you see all this information that's going down on this. And when you write it down, you start thinking about where they are, what's going on. It makes sense, and somebody can plot this on a board. So if you have multiple units out there sending out salute reports, you can observe multiple enemies, or maybe you are triangulating on enemy force. Continuing on page 50. The team reported with what they was observed in detail, line by line. At the end of each line, they utilized break to indicate that they were done and going to the next line, while keeping their physical description short and precise. Also used was a sarneg for the location as well as indicating the time zone local for the time zone of observation. Going back to the primary purpose of salute and salt reports, understand that the handing off of this information is intended first to give an intelligence analyst the tools he needs to make an accurate assessment of the capabilities of observed enemy, or an assessment of whether they're an enemy at all. For the group on the ground, the primary questions become: how much information do we need to positively identify, PID, a target when handing them off to other groups? In Afghanistan, we used salute and salt extensively to hand off targets between our teams operating in a given area. When we conducted patterns of life missions against suspected Taliban villages, watching a target, collecting all the pertinent information to collect a timeline of behaviors before attacking them, we would routinely write out salute reports, specifically naming and identifying characteristics of individuals of interest. This way, what one team could see and the others could not, we were able to hand off to maintain eyes on target. This is a primary training method in surveillance and reconnaissance. Once, while observing a target, we had one team observe 2 men and placing an IED on a route into the target village. I could not see them from my position, and they were outside engagement range. All they could do was mark the site of the IED and call it up in a salute report along with PID on the 2 targeted individuals. Once they completed laying the IED and moved back to the village, we engaged them and the other armed Taliban that came to their aid from the village. All of this was possible with accurate, disciplined salute report. All of the underscores that needed for accurate reporting. All of this underscores the need for accurate reporting, since the bread and butter of the guerrilla lay with the concept of mobile warfare, i.e. streamlining the roles of reconnaissance and combat as seamlessly as possible while conserving as much of your own resources as possible. The salute report plays an instrumental role in identifying targets of interest and, conversely, the ones to bypass. It goes without saying, attacking hardened troops such as line infantry units of occupation force is a particularly bad idea, especially early in a guerrilla war phase. Support troops, however, present a far more lucrative and usually successful target, with the added psychological benefit of sapping the morale of a larger force dependent upon them. Ergo, a guerrilla's training must heavily rely upon observation and discernment. And we're on page 52. I'm going to take a break. I like what he talked about on here, and I think he's rehashed what I kind of said too. I can never remember this lady's name. She was in a convoy, and it was during Afghanistan, the Jihad era. They were driving along, and they got ambushed, and pretty much everybody died, but I think her. And she was a hostage, and the special forces came in and got her out. I'm not hating on her. There was a lot of comments about her capability and stuff like that, but she was a support element. She was not a line infantry. The line infantry guys out there, if you talk to even the Jihad era style line infantry guys, there was a differential experience for the Taliban out there from people who were armed and ready to shoot stuff, the reservists that came in at times, and some of the support group elements. There were vehicles that were just mounted with firearms, and they said, hey, don't shoot at those guys because they will bring hell on them. One of the key things that I picked up over time is the Taliban thought that the Americans had lions because of the K9 units, and they're like, don't shoot at that, they have the lions. That said, there's other units that got smacked, and it happened to be a lot of the transportation logistics side of it. As my nom de guerre I go by as guerrilla logistician, I saw a lot of that, and the logistics side of the military got hit a lot, to including the civilian side. What we don't discuss a lot is GWAT was moved a lot by Pakistanis and jingle trucks, and that was a lot of the sustainment stuff. This wasn't the weapons and all that critical infrastructure stuff, but the wood, the water, the food stuff, sometimes the comfort items, and even some of the medical stuff would come that way, and bulk stuff. That said, they got attacked a lot, and it was interesting to see the parallels between how we convoyed and how the Afghanis and Pakis like to move. Some of those guys didn't like going in convoys because they knew they'd be attacked, and they tried to stealth through it. Well, they also got attacked at times and would come up to the bases, shot full of holes, bleeding, still alive, but they were riddled full of holes because Taliban knew that vehicle was not friendly to them, and it was an easy attack. A lot of supplies also got smoked that way. Granted, the Taliban weren't getting ammo and weapons and stuff like that from those engagements, but it was still a cut in morale, supplies, and sometimes it's stupid stuff like they shot up a thing full of Gatorade and snacks that were probably bought in Saudi Arabia and transmitted in because we saw all the Arab writing on a lot of this stuff too. That demoralizes the people who are transporting. It just is. And they're like, yeah, do I want to go? Is it going to be worth it? Now, it costs more to do that kind of stuff. We're going to continue on. Page 53. Che Guevara was a doctor by training in Argentina. Based on his own work in the Motorcycle Diaries, despite his upbringing in an upper-class, left-leaning household in Argentina, his true radicalization into Marxist revolution came about during his traveling residency, administering medical aid to the poor. It would become a staple of his plan to comfort revolution in Cuba. It would become a staple of his plan to foment revolution in Cuba, where it was most successful, but also in the Congo and later in Bolivia. Despite his role as a guerrilla force commander, his administering of medical aid to the impoverished through free clinics fomented favorability among the target populace. It has been a model used by leftists and adopted by the U.S. as a doctrine both in special forces and in civilian affairs since. It works. With that said, the treatment of battlefield casualties must be at the center of the guerrilla commander's planning should he wish to be successful in maintaining morale. Fighters have reason to believe in a cause, especially one in which they are fighting for justice and social change. When they see the effort of a commander makes to recover and care for them under duress, thus the medevac becomes a vital role, and with it, the medevac request. A proper medevac request is a handoff of information about the patient and the considerations for care being made both by a team providing the initial care under fire and the responding units conducting the medevac. For example, one of the first combat engagements in Iraq was initiated by a mass casualty event. The lead vehicle in a patrol hit a catastrophic IED, amputating both legs of the driver and the left leg of the front passenger, which we call the truck commander, TC. Both rear passengers were thrown through the doors and the gunner was ejected from the turret. All were severely wounded. My platoon leader coordinated the search effort for the missing gunner while our medic with the platoon's medic treated the casualties in order of severity. My platoon sergeant was busy coordinating the medevac request over the radio. The medevac card we all carried with us was the one below. Now, there's a picture of a medevac card below, and I will go into that a little bit later. I'm going to stop on page 54, and I want to come back to this with Liquored Rabbit, or maybe even Teddy and Liquored Rabbit, to have this conversation and probably expand on some of their ideas. I don't want to dig too deep into this right now, and I want to make a short one just to post out during the week, and we also want to talk about historian stuff too. Guys, maybe one gal that's out there listening to this, comms is going to be a major vital thing for you. The reason why is anything on the internet, anything on your cell phone is compromised from the get-go. And that's because it's so easy to hack in and get past the encryption that you think you have, to the point that you can go and have the keys logged before they ever get injected into Sessions, Breyer, etc. That's not to say throw away the phone forever. There are uses, and I think Scout has really kind of proven the point in here when we were talking earlier about changing words, changing your brevity code, etc. to suit you. Maybe your comms shouldn't be, hey, things are going bad. People have gotten shot. Somebody important we know has been shot. Things are now real bad in our area. Maybe it should just be a go word like, hey, there's a nuke went off in Washington, D.C. and everybody's moving. Well, we want everybody at the camp. Maybe it's just Alpha Bravo Charlie, something stupid, or Budweiser, or whatever word you want to use. That things have gone sideways and you need to get over here. This gets ignored a lot, and a lot of people don't plan for that, and I firmly need to spend some time talking to a friend about that too. But I don't think things are going to get better. I don't know for sure, and I always hope all the time that I'm just a crazy man on a podcast discussing problems that we'll never have to face in my lifetime. But it doesn't look that way. I want you guys prepared for what you can be. Highly recommend his book. Joe Dolio's books are extremely good too. There are Mike Shelby's book on the Area Intelligence Handbook is worth your read, and that is probably one of the critical things a lot of people don't even spend any time on. They don't ever do a good area intelligence survey. They just don't. You don't know what resources you have and what you don't have, or what potentially you could have, or what you potentially might be missing. And that's a big problem for a lot of people. This also drives back into historian. I'm going to do another podcast on that. I'll probably do the podcast discussing it, and I would like to have him on as a podcast. Maybe we'll try to do it next week if I've got the time. I wanted to do it this weekend, but I just kind of ran out of time, as normal. And I think his information is probably more important than ever. So, as always, keep your shoveling tool sharp. Please don't be a loot drop if things go sideways. Don't be the guy running around in 1,000 pounds of gear, going nowhere, and getting shot and having all your intel leaked to some nut job with horn rim glasses, a septum piercing, and crazy hair because you want to look like G.I. Joe instead of being smart. I know we won't always have that. I know everybody won't be smart, but let's make sure anybody who goes off the deep end, keep your lunatics confined with information and stuff like that. But that's all another conversation for another time. You guys have a great time. I appreciate you listening to us, and hopefully we'll get to everybody back on the podcast next week, hopefully with Historian. We'll see.